Okay. Wonderful. Well, greetings. Thank you so much for joining the Association of Indiana Museums today. We are so glad you could join us for Aim to Connect, Building Alliances, Community Partnerships, and Exhibits and Content Development. We have Kisha Tandy, the Curator of Social History with the Indiana State Museum and Historic Sites, and Bethany Hrachovec with us. She is the Director of Education and Engagement with the Indiana Historical Society. So my name is Katie Harvey, and I'm the program chair for AIM. Before I pass the program off to Kisha and Bethany, I'd like to invite you to put any questions that you may have during the program in the chat feature. At the end of the program, we'll have a Q&A session, where we'll answer your questions. And then you'll also be invited at that time to unmute yourselves and ask questions, as well as share any experiences that you have regarding the topic today. So without further ado, I pass this off to Kisha and Bethany.
Good afternoon. I am Kisha Tandy, Curator of Social History at the Indiana State Museum and Historic Sites. Thank you for attending this session this afternoon.
It's fine, I'm muted. You ready to share?
In just a second. Yes, you can go ahead and share now. Okay. Thank you. Yes. I will discuss two recent exhibits developed by curators, educators, and exhibit developers at the museum and numerous community partners. Bethany will do all the slides this afternoon. So we will go to the next slide, please. Next slide, please. The community partners and collaborations were extremely important to development and engagement implementation. We are working to have transformative, not transactional partnerships. Transformative partnerships to go beyond a one-time experience and more sustaining and mutually beneficial to all involved. We want our partnerships and collaborations to be ongoing. Next slide, please. An example of this was the exhibition Fix, Heartbreak and Hope Inside Our Opioid Crisis. From crisis to resolution, shifting our focus. We realized that the United States was in the middle of a crisis that was impacting our families, communities, and Indiana is at the epicenter, opioid use disorder. At the Indiana State Museum, we wanted visitors to talk about it. Visitors were invited to discuss. This exhibit ran from February 1st, 2020 through August 1st, 2021. It was a powerful exhibition, and it showed how the museum was committed to finding ways for Indiana communities to come together to shift the conversation and break the stigma surrounding opioid use disorder. The goal was to remove the shame and isolation surrounding this disease in order to show how all of us can play a pivotal role in managing this devastating crisis. Next slide, please. We'll watch a short video that offers a little more information about why this exhibit was so important.
At the Indiana State Museum, we're looking for relevancy. When you look at topics that are important to everyone, one of them has been the opioid crisis.
For Fix, we want people to change our relationship to the stigma around the opioid crisis. That's been our guiding principle.
All of us think differently, but we have preferences of how we want to learn about things. We make sure that we include entry points for anyone's type of thinking to make sure that everyone in your group finds a place to start.
There's engagement points throughout. The recovery section is super strong because there's a ton of things to do. Whether you're in the crisis or just learning about it, there's something for you to do and there's something to be engaged with.
Our partners with Fix have been really supportive and excited that we're offering something at this caliber and having this conversation about social issues in our community that are impacting every Hoosier.
That was a big wow factor. We're always trying to increase visitor interactivity, visitor engagement. We want to give things for people to do so that they can feel that they're part of the story, that they see themselves in the story, and there's something there for them. I really love to see it all come together. It comes out as a cohesive product that honors the visitor and honors their exploration of the space. We're going to be known for really innovative ways to address topics through interaction. We said we were going to flip the script on an exhibit about a health crisis, and we did.
What I did know was that if we turned that over to a group of people who could wrap their arms around it, wrap their imagination around it, really work within the community, that we could come up with a powerful resource where our visitors could see themselves in something that normally no one talks about. Developing Fix has given us an opportunity to understand just how far we can push ourselves, how important using the community as a resource is. It is really important for us to take this opportunity to look at how we can help society hold up the mirror so that we can all learn and fill in the blanks together with real information, real facts.
Thank you. Next slide, please. Inside the exhibit, visitors were given the opportunity to dive deeper into their own level of understanding when it came to substance use and opioids. They also saw how their perceptions and ideas about this crisis compare with others from around the state. Unraveling the crisis one step at a time included exploring the science and biology behind opioid use disorder, our nation's history with this health crisis, personal stories from impacted Hoosiers, and various roads to recovery. And I hope that you were able to see some of those elements in the video. One of the ways that visitors were able to dive deeper was through the images from Pulitzer Prize-winning photographer Bill Foley. Bill Foley created What We Can Do, Zone 5, and this was all recovery images and photographs. William Foley, provided 40 images that captured an accurate portrayal of the opioids recovery process from across Indiana. You see one of those images here. He wanted to share images from across Indiana, and he worked with Brandon George of the Indiana Addictions Issues Coalition to identify appropriate events to attend and photograph subject matter suitable for what would be included in What We Can Do Zone 5. Working closely with Brandon George, Bill Foley documented the everyday realities associated with the opioid crisis. He was able to bring these images together to capture stories and to share recovery and images of hope. This first image here focuses on the Recovery Cafe here in Indianapolis. The Recovery Cafe is designed to help people maintain recovery and reduce setbacks. It is a safe and welcoming space where members can get help with housing, social and health services, education, and employment. This image here, you can see, it has the label and it just has various people, but it shows how people have come together to help with recovery. Here they say that at the Recovery Cafe, recovery happens. It is a safe place and that you can get support from your peers and you can see each other's strengths and celebrate with every step of the way, with every piece of growth. Next slide, please. So here in this slide, you can see additional images that were taken by Bill Foley. And these, again, there were 40 images. And so you can see them here along with the additional information, really helping to tell that story, very, very personal stories as well. And you can see how the photographer captured many different moments. Next slide, please. So as part of creating this experience, Bill Foley worked directly with the exhibit developer, Kathy Donnelly. Art was an integral part of the experience. The artists were involved from the beginning. Fine arts curator Mark Rushman worked closely with the artists as well. And so you can see here in this image, that is Bill Foley there, and then our exhibit developer. And you can just see how they're working together, creating and developing this section of the exhibit, this section of the experience. Again, this idea of working together, building partnerships and collaboration, and helping to tell stories of recovery. Next slide, please. So here you can see a little more of the exhibit. And one of the things that we're going to focus on is another art piece. And that art piece is the piece that looks somewhat like a fort. You can see different pieces of clothing near the back. And so we're going to go to the next slide so you can see a closer look at We, which was created by Philip Campbell. And again, this piece was called We, and it was a quilt habitat. This piece was commissioned by the museum. Phil is currently working with Eskenazi Health as a supervisor in the Project Point Opioids initiative. Working on the front lines of the hospital's emergency room, Phil and his team meet with the immediate and long-term needs of incoming patients with overdoses and drug addiction, making the opioid epidemic a significant part of his daily work. Phil created a custom design gallery installation, and it featured 3D textile construction with interactive components. It was designed to be 10 by 10 by 10 gallery installation. And his inspiration for this piece, he is an Indianapolis-based mixed media artist. He has in the past created pieces that are to reflect a fort, a quilt, giving this kind of space for closing in, for meditation. And this was definitely something that he used as he was developing this piece here. The structure is designed to replicate a child's fort, inviting visitors to enter and creating an opportunity to experience a more intimate space within the larger fixed experience. The installation included interactives that encourage self-discovery and reflection on the larger message of the exhibit. The structure is made of discarded clothing that the artist disassembled and stitched back together. And this idea came from Phil's working at Eskenazi in the emergency room, where he recognized his appearance, and people were able to connect to him because of the way that he looked. This had a direct impact, and it also allowed for him to relate to his patients. We also provided the opportunity to create a visual texture. It was an unexpected piece in comparison to some of the other items in the exhibition. Two of the quilts that you see here as a part of We are now a part of the museum permanent collection. So you can see, working very closely with these two artists, you have two quilts that are now part of the museum permanent collection and building collaboration and partnerships. And these are ongoing partnerships. Next slide, please. I wanted to put this slide here because I wanted you to be able to see just the number of individuals who helped and who were part of developing Fix. And you can see just so many active partners and people who could bring their expertise to the museum and to help develop a much needed and important exhibition. I wanted to play one more video from the experience, and these videos are all available online. And at the end of the presentation, Bethany will have a QR code that will link you so that you're able to access educational materials and additional materials about the exhibits that we are discussing today. And so I want to show this one because, again, it shows how working with individuals in the community, we were able to tell a story that was accurate and that also put personal perspective into the crisis, the opioid crisis that has impacted Indiana so much. Bethany?
My name's John Lee. I am a person in long-term recovery, and I also work in recovery now for Mental Health America of Indiana. I believe every single person in the organization I work for is in long-term recovery, and my boss especially, he's big on self-care. So, I mean, every Friday, like clockwork, he'll tell us, Self-Care Friday, make sure you guys do something to take care of yourselves. You know, and I try to do something daily, whether it's work out, meditate, even eating healthy. Almost everything we do affects our lives, our mind, our body, our spirit. I noticed a difference in my mentality, just in general, or my emotional state. So, you know, when I start to notice that, that's when I realize, like, I need to be consistent in staying healthy and doing what I need to do to keep myself, mind, body, and spirit. It's almost a natural way for me to release endorphins in my head and just release everything that's going on in life and to have my own time. You know, I can sit there, listen to music, and by the time I'm done working out, like I said, I'm in a whole new mind space. No matter what was going on in the day, you know, I forget about it all for that, 15 to 60 minutes. You know, I've noticed a big difference in my body just in the last 8 years. It's not the same as it used to be. I can't just do any and everything I wanted to and not feel the effects from it. You know, not eating healthy, not working out, not doing things positively for myself. It has a negative effect on myself now. And it's so much more noticeable today than it was when I was 18 years old. The difference is huge.
Thank you, Bethany. And again, you can just see the number of collaborators, persons, and individuals that helped to share their expertise and to help tell this important story. Next slide, please. So as you can see, we had numerous community collaborators in FIX and working and helping to develop the FIX exhibition experience. And now we're going to discuss Major Taylor, the fastest cyclist in the world. And this was also another project where we had numerous partners and individuals that helped us to tell this story of the remarkable athlete, Marshall Major Taylor. And also with this exhibit, art was very important. And you will see that as we go throughout the visual tour of this exhibition. But first, I want to tell you share information with you about Marshall Walter Taylor, who was born here in Indianapolis, who would become a champion cyclist and would be known as Major Taylor. Marshall Taylor was born in Indianapolis, November 26, 1878. He was born to Gilbert and Sophronia Taylor. He was one of 8 children, and his family came to Indianapolis from Kentucky. And while they lived in Kentucky, we can tell from the 1870 census that 3 children had already been born there before coming to Indianapolis. His father, Gilbert, had served as a soldier, had served in the United States colored troops, and his family would come here. And when his father worked here, he worked for the Southern family. And the Southern family, they had a son, and that son's name was Dan. And Dan was born in July of 1878. Marshall was born in November of 1878. The 2 children, the 2 young boys, they would become friends, and Major Taylor would receive his first bicycle as part of him knowing Dan Southern and being around that family. His father, Gilbert, served as the coachman for the family. As a young boy, Major would do trick riding, and he loved being able to do tricks and being able to ride his bicycle. As he got better on the bike, he would also enter into races here in Indianapolis. and he would be known as Major. As early as the age of 11, he was known as Major Taylor. In the newspaper articles, there are many that describe him as Major and how he's riding and winning races here in Indianapolis. And he worked for a bicycle shop. He worked for two here in Indianapolis. And it was at one of these bicycle shops that he would his attention would be caught by an individual who would become his mentor. In 1895, he would leave Indianapolis with Bertie Munger, who was a former cyclist, and they would move to Worcester, Massachusetts. By 1896, Major would become a professional cyclist. He would set 7 world records by 1898. By 1899, he would become the second Black man to win a world championship, and he would win the World 1 Mile in Montreal, Canada. By 1900, he was an American sprint champion, and in 1901, he would take his first trip overseas, where he would begin racing overseas. He would race in front of numerous fans, and he would be an international superstar as an athlete. In 1902, he married Daisy Victoria Morris, and in 1904, they would have their only child, their daughter, Rita Sydney Taylor, and eventually Brown. She was born in Sydney, Australia. And it is Sydney who donated the collection that would serve as the foundation for this exhibit to the museum in 1988. This collection is significant. It includes 9 scrapbooks that help to chronicle Major's life and materials that he would use to write his autobiography that was published in 1928. We have 135 postcards. We have 50 letters dated to 1909, and we have many photographs as well as 2 trophies. So you can see this collection was extremely important as we were developing this exhibit, as we were researching, and as we were pulling everything together to tell the story of this remarkable athlete. Next slide, please. So this is the entryway to the experience. This experience ran from March 5th until October 23rd of 2022. So it just closed. And this piece was created by local artist Walter Loban Hamilton, along with his son Xavier. He wanted the entryway to be a space that he created to tell a more nuanced story, the complex story of Major Taylor. He talks about how he knew about Major, but mostly from the Major Taylor Velodrome. And one of the things that was so important, at least to me, was that Walter Loban Hamilton came to the museum more than once to review the collection. And it is evident in the piece that he produced. He came in, he looked at photographs, he looked at letters, he looked at this collection and helped to use that information to create the piece, but it also served as the foundation for the piece. So on this wall, you can see that there are newspaper clippings, and then there are letters and things that have been created into a collage, and then they're centered on the walls. And then on the back side, there are more images of Major Taylor with his family, and the image that was included in the Chicago Defender that was used as part of his obituary. And it is incredible how he was able to put together these pieces to help tell the story of Major. He really wanted to be able to bring his life and to highlight his life. And he said at the end that this exhibit was about love. And I can appreciate that because Major Taylor loved his daughter and his family, and he loved his sport. And I'll quote Walter. He said, the exhibit ultimately is about love. Love of the sport, love of competition, love for his daughter. And he hoped that he was able to tell the story through his work of this champion and that everyone could see this holistic story. He wanted the meat of the story to come out, and he wanted this to help really shed light on Major Taylor's legacy. He learned how dedicated and intense he was, and he didn't know that Major had died broke and largely forgotten, but he did not want that to be the legacy of this piece. And that was really important because on the side, one side with the newspapers, you can see all of the great races, some of the challenges that Major had to overcome. But then on the opposite side, you can see letters. These are different letters that were written to his daughter, Sydney, and to his wife. And it's interesting because you can see where he calls Sydney his little bear. So you can see this idea of love. And in some of his letters, he calls his wife Granny. I do not know why he called his wife Granny. I'm not sure if you can see the small piece of the Bible that goes back to Major Taylor's faith. Now, the larger handwriting, that's writing that came, those were letters and pieces that were sent to Major Taylor. But you get this kind of sense of who Major Taylor is through the documents and the pieces. And one last thing about the newspapers, these are newspapers that Major Taylor clipped and that he kept in his scrapbooks. And there are 9 scrapbooks, and these scrapbooks are an amazing way to chronicle and to tell his story. And one of the things that Walter Loban Hamilton did is that he had a large sign outside of his studio. And that sign was there so that people near the East Side would know about the exhibition, but it was also a way to encourage them to come to the exhibit. And in fact, 200 people who would mention that they knew about the project and the exhibit and his company and the work that Walter Loban Hamilton did would receive free admission into the museum. So not only was he actively participating in developing and creating this important piece here at the museum, but he was also actively encouraging the community to come out and see it. And again, partnerships that are reaching beyond the museum and engaging and helping people to know about Major Taylor, the collection, but then also the museum and the exhibit. Also in this area, there is a wonderful poem that was written and performed by local artist January York. And she also came to the museum to look at the collection. She came twice, and she created a piece that was called A Major Deal. And she was able to tell Major Taylor's story in a few minutes and to capture some of the most meaningful moments in his life and to tell just how important his family, his work, being a cyclist, winning was. And it is captivating how she was able to tell that story. And you can hear that when you walk in, you first walk in, it played on rotation. Next slide, please. So another way in which we were able to connect is that we had a partnership with a local individual who is a Major Taylor enthusiast and who also served on the board of the United States Bicycle Hall of Fame. And through working with him and his efforts, we were able to have on loan the only documented bike that we know of that Major Taylor rode, that he rode in competition. And this bike dates back to his European visits when he was overseas and when he was riding. And so being able to have Major Taylor's bicycle in the exhibit was outstanding. It was so important to help tell the story and for visitors to see the bike. And it was really interesting. I remember being in the gallery and there was a man who was just there and talking about the bike to whomever would come up and ask a question. He just stood there for a very long time, observing, reading the labels, and it was just great to be able to see that. And again, just so happy that we were able to have a bike to help tell the story. And now on opposite sides of the bike, there were 2 trophies that are part of the museum collection that we were able to also include in an exhibit. They were both from 1901, one from Berlin and one from racing in Paris. But being able to have them all come together was just a great opportunity to highlight Major Taylor's life, to demonstrate his victories, and to show that, yes, he was indeed a remarkable athlete. And this quote here was one that has been used many times, but it's so important because I was a pioneer and therefore had to blaze my own trail. That definitely stands as a testament to Major Taylor's life. Next slide, please. So here we wanted to, and throughout different parts of the exhibit, to talk about STEM and how we can engage our visitors and how they could connect to Major Taylor and his story. Because Major Taylor was a cyclist, he was a husband, he was a father, and he was a son, and he was someone who also, of course, was very active on a bike. And so in this area, visitors had the opportunity to build a bicycle. These are Infento bicycle kits, and there was easy, medium, and hard, and visitors could put them together and then ride them if they wanted to. There we had a track in the exhibit where visitors could ride bikes that had already been created, or the bicycles or scooters that they created themselves. We also had helmets and things for visitors to use if they wanted to ride in the track in the gallery. Next slide, please. Here, this piece talked about how a bike works, and it allowed for visitors to see the many different components of the bike. And it was interesting because another time in the gallery, we talk about how one individual came and said he did not realize how many components there were to a bicycle. And so this helps to tell that. And then to your right, you can see a section of the exhibition where we talk about the bicycle craze that happened here in Indianapolis, and not only in Indianapolis, but throughout the country during the 1890s. And there are various photographs of individuals throughout Indianapolis riding their bikes and just telling the story of how important cycling was here in Indianapolis. Next slide, please. So in the exhibit, you have the opportunity to learn about Major Taylor's life, how he was a pioneer, how he was a trailblazer. And you also get to learn about how his legacy and how he has inspired other cyclists. And in one part of the exhibit, you will see visitors had the opportunity to see images that were photographed by local photographer Wildstyle, and to read different stories and bits and pieces of information that were written by Mark Latta. Here we're going to see a short video by one of the contemporary cyclist, Raji Johnson. And it's interesting because his bicycle is a custom bicycle. It's a 10-foot long bicycle. But what's interesting about him is that he came to the museum and he came with his bike, and he came a couple of times where he was in the gallery, and he was telling people and talking to people about his experiences as a cyclist, and just really being engaging and helping to share stories. So I wanted you to see a video from Raji Johnson.
My name is actually Desmond Royce Johnson, but in the bike community, everybody knows me as Raji. The bike community is just like a bunch of different types of bikers that gets together and just goes out and have a good time. We don't really enforce people who come in with drama or anything, because most of the people is there like trying to release stress from work or their own lives and like trying to forget about everything bad just to have a good time. If you don't have any friends in your life or anything, you are bound to find some there. Like everybody gets along with somebody in the bike community. And like you can even like shed out your like feelings or something, like if you're having a bad day, somebody is bound to like actually pick up and like try to put you on a good day. Other cities and states, I'm gonna throw that in there as well. States, their bike communities is not as large as ours. I usually run into different bike crews that's just like, you got the custom bikes, you got the like beach cruisers, you got the swim family, then I mean you got us, you got road rage, but there's also the delivery service people that like they also hop in for like bike party and everything. And then you just got like the people who sees us on the side and they be like, oh, I want to join. And we just be like, oh yeah, you can come out next week. We're having this ride, and you know they show up and they just also have a good time with us. They see the bikes, they enjoy themselves, take pictures, videos, whatever. And that's just basically the bike community. My daughter, when I first rode with her, she was probably about, I want to say she was about like 11 months. So me biking with my daughter is actually kind of more of a bonding session. If you like see us while we're not even riding a bike or like actually just like walking around or anything, the first thing she do when she walks in the door and she hasn't seen me in a while is literally run up to me screaming. And that's like one of the most important things that I like to see out of my daughter, because I actually want to be there in her life for her. My dad pops up on some of the rides and events because I actually invite him. I invite him to everyone, but my dad, he actually works out of state. But when he's here, he actually shows up, and that's basically one of our bonding times, our father and son bonding time. And just for him to be able to, you know, step out of the house and go, hey, I'm about to go for a bike ride with my son, actually means a lot to me.
Thank you, Bethany. And I never actually met Mr. Johnson, but I love sharing this story because I think about Major Taylor and his daughter, Sydney. And one of the postcards he writes and he asks her, has she been on her bicycle today? And just that connection, and you hear him talking about his daughter as well. And so it also goes back to the concept that Walter Loeb and Hamilton had, with the exhibit being about love. So I love sharing his story. Also, you know, the visitors enjoyed looking at, you know, the image of his bicycle as well. Next slide, please. Okay, so one of the partners that we had was the Learning Tree, and it is a community group here in Indianapolis, and it was a significant partner. This partnership continues to bring forth, and it is an ongoing partnership. And I'll just read a short piece about the Learning Tree. The Learning Tree is an association of neighbors that specializes in asset-based community development, learning, and education that improves the quality of lives of people, communities, schools, and businesses. And this organization, again, like the artists, they were brought in from the very beginning. And they were extremely helpful as we were developing various components of the exhibition. And here is one example of how this came together. Theon Lee, who you will see in the video in just a second, helped to explain to visitors how you could change a flat tire. It was told in 4 steps, and we actually had right in there a tire that could be flat, and then you could fix the flat yourself. So we'll see, this video is under 40 seconds, but he'll explain to you how you can change a flat tire.
Hey, my name is Theon Lee. I'm from Learning Tree, and I'm going to teach you how to change a tire. The first step we're going to do is we got to make sure to release all the air from the actual inner tube. Step 1 involves finding the valve, pressing down to release it. Now, for certain valves, you'll need a tool to be able to release it, but this kind of valve here, you just press down.
So this was a series of 4 short videos, again, just explaining how you could change a flat, and you could do that in the exhibition. Great interaction from visitors, and also a great way to engage community partners. Another example of how the Learning Tree connected with the museum and is a part of an ongoing partnership is that the Learning Tree partnered with the museum to host a series of focus groups that would engage and that would examine community engagement. They invited community members that had not been to the museum or rarely had been to the museum to participate and to get a chance, the opportunity to share their thoughts about what it means to be part of a cultural institution. And so that took place during the summer months, and also individuals were able to create and show and highlight different ways that they thought that museums could tell history and could share history. And so that is just another way of how this organization helped and continues to help with the Indiana State Museum and historic sites. Another example is that also Theon Lee working with, and this was organized by Kay Hawthorne. They organized a community ride from Riverside Park, which is a neighborhood where the Learning Tree is and where a lot of their work and efforts take place. Kayla Hawthorne, she organized a community ride on September 17th from Riverside Park to the Indiana State Museum. So they rode their bicycles to the museum, came upstairs and saw the exhibition. And this was the total amount of people I believe came, attended and participated were 30. And so that allowed for 30 individuals to have this opportunity for a community ride, and then also the opportunity to see the exhibition, and just another way to engage the community and to build on these partnerships. And that was a wonderful experience, having the individuals to come into the museum and see the exhibit and the great work that Kay and Theon did in pulling it all together. The next slide. So this last slide was one of my favorite sections of the exhibit. And to be fair, the entire exhibit was my favorite. I am so grateful that we had the opportunity to tell the story of Major Taylor, his obstacles, his struggles, how he was able to overcome the dreadful monster prejudice, the reasons why he left Indianapolis, and that in the end, he was resilient, he was determined, and he was a remarkable athlete who cared dearly for his family. So it all means so much to me. In this section, however, this is one of those places where I would always smile. Major Taylor was the fastest cyclist in the world. And you can see on the wall, we have some of his record times. And so this interactive was developed so visitors could take the opportunity, the chance to try to beat him at his quarter-mile sprint. And so you see the Pacers bike share, and you would see the individuals get on the bike and they're trying to beat Major. And we also had a hand crank, so that you could also do that to try to beat Major Taylor. And it would always be very interesting because people would get off the bikes or let go of the hand crank there, and they would be panting, but they would be smiling, but they would never beat Major Taylor. And I did this many times. We were never going to beat Major Taylor. So that was one of those areas that always made me smile. Next slide. Thank you very much. And now I will turn it over to Bethany.
Hey everyone. So I'm actually going to talk about two separate exhibits that are housed really in the same space. So they're kind of connected and they work in tandem. So the two exhibits are Eva Kor from Auschwitz to Indiana and the USC Shoah Foundation's Dimensions in Testimony. For those that may not be familiar, I'm with the Indiana Historical Society, and we are Indiana Storyteller, connecting people to the past. We collect and preserve Indiana's unique stories, bring Hoosiers together in remembering and sharing the past, and inspire a future grounded in our state's uniting values and principles. We collect primarily paper-based and born digital objects. And so we have that unique challenge of figuring out how to tell and help people connect to stories without objects. The projects that I'm going to talk about are really projects that began with Ted Green and WFYI and started with a documentary called Eva A7063. And this was actually a documentary released in 2018. So this project has been going on for quite a number of years now. You will have access to this PowerPoint. We're really tight on time today, so I'm not going to show you the documentary trailer, but it is incredibly impactful. I highly recommend it if you haven't had a chance to see it. Instead, I'm going to move into directly a little bit more of an understanding of how IHS became close in partnership with the different organizations related to this project. So as I said, the documentary was really kind of the thing that started it all back in 2018. But accompanying the documentary was this thing called the Eva Experience. It was a virtual reality headset where Eva literally takes you on a virtual tour of Auschwitz. And so you walk through Auschwitz virtually with her as she's telling you the story of her being there. Eva was a Mengele twin. She and her twin sister were subjected to horrors by Dr. Mengele throughout their time at Auschwitz and throughout the Holocaust. And she eventually relocated to Terre Haute, Indiana, hence the Indiana storytelling. She really made waves with her foundational principle of forgiveness. She forgave the Nazis for the crimes against her. She didn't forgive on behalf of all Jewish people or all sufferers of the Holocaust. She forgave for herself. And so that's really kind of what she's known for. But her story of forgiveness and empathy connected with students through the Eva experience. TED and WFII were looking for a place to show more students the documentary and participate in the VR at a single time. And so IHS really became the home for that because we had worked with both of them on previous projects over the years. While this is all going on, our development team was contacting Eva and her family to highlight her as a living legend in 2019. Now, unfortunately, Eva passed away on July 4th of 2019, just a few weeks before the event, but this really brought in Alex, her son, into a much more close relationship with us. So at this point, we've connected our visitor experience, our education, our development, and our marketing teams throughout these different pieces. This relationship grew. Ted was, or Alex, I apologize, was really trying to find a home for his mother's materials after her passing. The Candles Museum in Terre Haute that she founded still houses all of Eva's materials related to the Mengele twin experiments in the Holocaust. But Alex was looking for a home for her family photographs, her family writings, all of her personal materials. And because of the trust that we had been able to build with him over the course of several years, we became the home of what is now known as the Eva Kor collection in 2021 that was gifted to us. I've included a little bit of the collection guide here. You'll also have full access to that in that folder of resources. This partnership continued all the way until March 2022. And of course, it's continuing beyond this, but for the purposes of this timeline, the exhibit and both exhibits launched in March of 2022, so just this year. Altogether, almost every department in our building had hands in cultivating these relationships and these partnerships. And I wanted to give you just a little bit of a scope of the sponsors who participated in different ways in funding the exhibit and helping to develop content, Our content advisors who really supported the exhibit development included Janet Holcomb, who was a close friend of the Kor family, the Jewish Community Relations Council of Indianapolis, authors, biographers of Eva, Holocaust experts, Jewish history and culture experts, religious experts, personal friends of Eva, and then other people who didn't necessarily serve on our content advisory board also offered up their own personal stories and exhibit and photos and anecdotes to go along with the exhibit. And so truly a monumental amount of people came to help make this project happen. Now, this exhibit does not seek to tell the story of the Holocaust. While that is a part of Eva's story, it's not her whole story. And so this exhibit does not try to just focus on her time in the Holocaust, although that is a foundational part of her life. It begins with her story and her life in Romania, provides context to the Holocaust, describes how Eva and her twin sister Miriam experienced the Holocaust, invites you to virtually walk through Auschwitz with Eva, describes her life as an activist for survivors and other survivors of medical experimentation outside of the Holocaust, and provides perspectives on her world-renowned concept of forgiveness. This then leads into that second exhibit, Dimensions and Testimony, which is an AR hologram technology where you can actually talk to Eva and she will answer your questions. It's absolutely fascinating. You should watch children in that space. They love to ask her all sorts of questions, including what her favorite food is, which is McDonald's chicken nuggets, or was McDonald's chicken nuggets. The exhibit finishes with a look at her lasting legacy. But the main thing that I want to hit on is that this entire exhibit and the relationships wouldn't have been possible without the partnerships that were made along the way between Ted Green Films and WFYI, Amy Guess, who recreated the dresses worn by Eva and Miriam when they entered Auschwitz. She was a close friend of Eva's and was a fabric craftsman, and so she recreated these dresses. Tanglewood Press and one of Eva's close friends and biographers, Peggy Tierney, contributed the artwork for our reflection points, which are points for students and families to connect with some of the content on a little bit more personal level. We leveraged partnerships with Echoes and Reflections, which is a national Holocaust education group, and they loaned the use of this timeline that they had developed for our teachers to understand the timeline of the Holocaust, because we really recognized that it wasn't a good use of our resources to pretend or try to be an expert in Holocaust and developing the timeline when there were experts out there that we could leverage their resources and their expertise for the betterment of this exhibit. In total, over 25 different contributors brought in personal photographs to contribute to this mural wall. And of course, this exhibit wouldn't have been possible without the partnership of Candles. It was a wonderful partnership with them to actually bring in the Dimensions and Testimony piece on loan from their exhibit where it permanently lives. Ted and Alex were generous and continue to be generous with their time and participated in a documentary screening and a talkback with us. All of the exhibit advisors contributed different resources to our educator resource guide. Again, our education team recognized that we shouldn't try to be the experts in teaching the Holocaust. We should help direct teachers to the resources that already exist and are wonderful at teaching those topics to students. They also contributed to our Get Connected, which is essentially our adult general public version of our educator resource guide. We're having further programming related to this exhibit. On November 22nd, we're having a panel discussion on eugenics and Indiana's history with the movement. We're having a final educator professional development session in November on the 19th on teaching media literacy and empathy skills through primary sources. We are having a conversation next year with interactive activities on forgiveness. And in January on Eva Education Day, we are having a family day, a family education day. I'm big on takeaways. Kisha and I were very big on takeaways as we were talking about this session originally. And so the thing that I really want to hit that is universal between mine and Kisha's sessions here is that there are meaningful partnerships that are around, and they take time to develop. The project that I talked about started in 2018, if not even earlier than that. If you rush a partnership, the trust may not be fully gained in order to make the project as successful as it could be. We were not able to take in Eva's family materials if it weren't for Alex's trust in us, and that didn't happen overnight. The second takeaway is that coordinated institutional efforts produce lasting results. I think, as you could see between Fix and then of course here with Eva and Major Taylor, this isn't a one-person show. There's so many different people that need to be at the table to make these projects happen. And everyone has to be on the same page to recognize that it's an institutional direction that you want to invest in for the project to be successful. The third takeaway is that you don't have to be the expert in everything. There are experts out there in the things that you want to talk about. You will spin your wheels and give yourself aneurysm in some ways, trying to be everything that you're not. And that's okay. Own what you are. We didn't have the time or the skills or the resources to be experts in developing a virtual reality experience. We have started to gain those skills, but we didn't have those at the time. Partnerships allow you to share more information in more creative ways than what you may be able to do within your scope and capacity. And finally, our final takeaway for you is don't reinvent the wheel. As museum professionals, I feel as though sometimes we have this urge to create something new that we and our organizations can own. And while that sense of ownership and accomplishment can be enticing, it is now more than ever important to see how we can help each other. If someone already has a timeline that teaches about your topic and is a wonderful resource, why not talk to them and see if you can leverage their expertise? You're sharing their name and their resources while not creating more work for yourself and getting your message across effectively. So don't reinvent the wheel. As I mentioned, you will have access to all of these resources that we talked about. This QR code will take you to the resources that Kisha and I mentioned, as well as a copy of this presentation. And so you will have all of those available in the recording. But I wanted to share just a couple of things in our final minutes here. Our exhibit is going to be open through January of 2024. So don't worry, if you haven't had a chance to see it, if you're enticed and want to see more, hit me up. I'd love to give you a tour. I'd love to connect you to some of the people who helped make this project possible. So if you have any questions, please feel free to shoot them my way. We'd be happy to share and connect you. But the other thing that I want to just raise everyone's awareness on, the Association of Midwest Museums Conference is going to be held in Indianapolis, July 26th through 29th next year, so 2023. Our call for proposals is going to go out next week. It's scheduled for Monday morning, so keep an eye out for that. Be thinking about some of the things that you'd like to highlight about your own institution. Not only the Midwest Museums, but we at the Association of Indiana Museums want to highlight the great work that Indiana professionals are doing in their field. And so look out for more information on the conference. Look out for ways to get in touch and involved with the Association of Indiana Museums, because we'd love to be able to highlight the work that you're doing as well. Thank you, Katie.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Bethany and Kisha. Amazing presentations. You can definitely see through both of your talks that, reaching outside of your expertise and leveraging relationships or finding new relationships really enhanced your visitor experience. It gave you objects to tell a story that you didn't have previously, artists, and having that visual connection for people who need that type of entry into the story, and then just people telling their stories. So I thank you both so much for telling us a little bit more about your experiences. If anybody has questions, feel free to enter it into the chat feature or come off mute and quickly ask. But one of the questions that I have for you both is, if an organization is new to looking for partnerships or have always used the same partners over and over again, what do you think would be a good way of kind of an entry point into that?
I think an entry point is looking at your mission. What is it that your organization is the expert in? What is the driving force behind your organization? If you're trying to look at reaching out to new communities, identify where your passions lie. Talk to your staff, talk to your teams and see what they're interested in. Talk to your frontline staff, talk to the people who are interacting with visitors. See what your visitors are really interested in getting to know. It might not be things that you currently have on display, and that's okay. But if you have visitors that are identifying, we'd really love to learn more about the Latino community. We want to interact with them. We want to know their history. Reach out, start showing up. Show up to different community meetings, different opportunities with them. And go in with the expectation that it's not a trade. You're not going to instantly get something from that relationship, but you have to make those first steps to start building that trust to make something happen longer term.
Yeah. Kisha, anything to, please.
Oh yeah, and I'm in complete agreement with Bethany, but I will also add, she mentioned talking to your staff, but also talk to your staff about organizations that they are working with, organizations that they have relationships with, because that's also an excellent opportunity, because maybe as an individual, they have been working with someone, but now it can expand and have a larger impact.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. We had a couple people had to hop off for other meetings at 1 o'clock, but it was just amazing to see the success and the connections that both your organizations were able to make to enrich your experiences. I just want to let folks know that we'll send a survey. Please let us know what you thought about today's program, as well as you'll have opportunities to share some exciting things that may be going on in your organization. You can tell us in the survey and we'll reach out to them, kind of like Bethany was saying there. But we are going to take a break for the holiday season. So November to December, our Aim to Connect programs will pause so the busy museums can do their great work, and then we'll join you back again in January. So thank you all so much. Have a wonderful day and a beautiful weekend. Talk to you later. Bye.